don't be afraid of losing your job. I think that's the real fear of adopting this philosophy. But I really do believe that the lack of adopting something like this is that fear that what happens if I do render myself like not needed? If I finish this project, if this project is done, if I find this solution that's like, wow, we're good. Is that fear that you will be redundant and laid off?
Hey, Creating Maven. I'm Joy Spencer, your reframe specialist, with one important message. Your real work, it's not your job or your career. Your real work is what you create. And what you create is what sets you apart and makes you incomparable. It's your legacy. I'm here to show you a whole new way of working so you can create with your gifts, make a unique contribution, and finally get paid to be yourself. This is Reframe to Create. In today's episode, my guest, Samuel Suraphel, does something for me I was not expecting. He gives me a reframe. Yes, my creating maven, the reframe specialist herself got a reframe from her guest, and I've been percolating on this for weeks, and I'm so excited to share it with you. You guys know that I'm always calling on you to think beyond your job and to remember that your real work lives outside of that narrow frame, that your real work is to create with your gifts. But what Samuel does in this conversation is to bring us closer with a microscope and give us tools to do the jobs we're in already differently. It's not just how to reframe our jobs from the outside by decentralizing them the way that I've been telling you to do. We dive into the concept of being mission-led and not job-led, a fascinating idea and a key orienting mindset that Samuel brought to his job many years ago, leading him in interesting directions and beyond his job into entrepreneurship. And I must say, he has a brand of entrepreneurship that looks a little different from anything else I've seen. I've known Samuel for a few years as a multi-talented and multi-passionate entrepreneur, global program manager, and technology specialist with over 20 years of experience designing, managing, and successfully completing complex projects that require creative problem-solving skills and leadership in a multicultural environment. When I created the How to Be a Better Collaborator workshop, he was a big supporter from the beginning. He caught the vision, and his support turned into a partnership and advocacy, including him connecting me to groups and a conference where I got to deliver the workshop as well. So he's really living and leading with his mission of supporting social entrepreneurs. Samuel is also a musician, so yes, he is the definition of a creating maven, and I've always been fascinated about how he shows up in the fullness of all of his gifts. You're going to love hearing all that he has to say. In the end, I know you'll be just as inspired and motivated as I was to recommit to this creating journey. We got right into it when I asked Samuel, what exactly in the world does it mean to be mission-led and not job-led?
When I think about that question, one of the thoughts that I have most frequently is that when you're in a job, especially if you're mission-led, you should actually be trying to work yourself out of that job as soon as you get in there or as soon as you get comfortable and situated. And what I mean by that is, especially from an entrepreneurial perspective, you are doing things and solving problems for people. You're identifying a challenge that they face, and your success is based upon you finding a solution and or adding the value to whatever process or project or product you're working on. And that's time limited, truly, if you're doing it right. For me, I would say the shorthand sort of maxim that I use is figuring out ways to work yourself out of a job, and not from a negative sense, but from a positive sense. And that keeps you always in that problem solving mode, in that solution mode, and not in the way in which you get settled in a position because it provides you those very necessary creature comforts and comforts that are needed to be a functioning person of our society. It's very easy, I think, to let that dominate your motivations. But if you sort of look at every job as one in which there's a time limit there, there's a problem being faced, and there's a solution. There's a permanent solution or a semi-permanent solution until you get to a bigger challenge. then you're always in that mode of thinking, okay, there's going to be a day where I'll render my current services useless, whether it is because you've solved the problem or you've built a team or an organization that can work on the problem on an ongoing basis and you can move on to another problem. But I think that's a good way to look at it.
Boom. I mean, boom. This is the reframe that hit me right between the eyes and had me shook for days. I want this to sink in for you because it lays the foundation for the rest of the episode. I mean, have you ever thought about your job this way? As a place you are working your way out of from day one? As an experience that has a specific problem you are trying to solve, and then you're done, you're out. Is this what you've been doing? Working your way out of your job? Or have you been, like most people, holding on tightly for dear life and trying to burrow in deep? I let Samuel know that this was a new way of looking at things for me, and I wanted to know how he came to this.
That thinking, I would say, is not a knock even to the folks who do want stability in a job and want to stay somewhere for a long time, because maybe, the problems that they're solving are outside of the whole work career space. They may need to be that person. I thought about that over the years and really come to understand how that works for other folks. How did I get to that? I would say work philosophy. It really accentuated itself for me when I was working in international development. I think I've always had an entrepreneurial perspective, but when I worked in nonprofit and then also international development settings, you come into that sector with a desire to make a positive social impact. There's an idealism that's involved when you work in that space. And then when you go into the industry, you start to ask yourself, why haven't any of these problems been solved yet? At least some of them, you know what I mean? Why are we still very much at the very early stages of even trying to find workable solutions to some of the issues that are some of the biggest issues that we're facing? What I realized was that I didn't really get a sense of how folks were looking to, like I said, work themselves out of a job. In that space, when I was in it, I kind of got a feeling that it became a career for a lot of folks, and one in which, again, not to say that philosophy for them was wrong, but from a solving this problem perspective, I thought that it wasn't optimal in many of these contexts. And so that's when that crystallized for me, this need to be hyper value driven in the work that I do. So when I transitioned from that to start Mansa Collabs, I became purposeful in positioning myself specifically to work with entrepreneurs, nonprofits, creatives who were very good at understanding and articulating value. And so if you interact with them and they don't see that you're capable or possible of providing them a solution to their current problem, they won't hire you. You know what I mean? And so I wanted to, and I told folks, even if you don't feel like you need my services, don't hire me. But as soon as you find that there is value in there, let's figure out how we can work together. And so that's when that, I would say, the nugget, so to speak, the articulation of that really came to sort of way of work, is making that intentional decision to say, I want to work on projects that I can make a substantial movement towards an outcome. And if and when I am able to help push that ball forward, I have to ask myself, am I needed? And that's what keeps me always ahead, because then that pushes me to find the next growth area that's in demand, or provide the next client that maybe needs a solution that I have, or also forces the folks that you work with to think beyond you. If they kind of have a sense that you're passionate about moving forward or moving on. And so that level sets even expectations.
So even the way you're describing this very entrepreneurial way and approach of working, with this focus on value is interesting, and an interesting thing for people who are currently in a role that where they're not external entrepreneurs. It'll be interesting for them to think about that. So what can you tell that person about the usefulness of having that mindset if they're still in a 9 to 5 or have no interest in being an entrepreneur?
Going back to folks who primarily want a stable 9 to 5 job because it has very real positive impacts on many portions of their lives, aspects of their lives, whether it be good income that funds so many other projects and endeavors, or their own growth in a place that fits their risk tolerance. What I would say is, don't be afraid of losing your job. I think that's the real fear of adopting this philosophy. And again, I haven't done any large scale tests across many people to see, how they fare. But I really do believe that the lack of adopting something like this is that fear that what happens if I do render myself like not needed? If I finish this project, if this project is done, if I find this solution that's like, wow, we're good. Is that fear that you will be redundant and laid off? But my hunch is, and I think, this can play out if you really think about it, is that if you adopt that philosophy of working yourself out of a job, you're not so tied to the processes that kind of make things linger or keep yourself there lingering. You know what I mean? Even if you're working in terms of for solutions, but then you yourself are not asking yourself the questions for your own professional development, then what tends to happen is you're really creating value for your team, for your bosses, for the company. And the folks that are the leadership will see that and say, wow, this person really is doing a good job. Where else can we apply their skills, their solution-oriented behavior? You know what I mean? How they're able to come across problems and do that, learn. It sort of puts you in that position to gain attention as well as demonstrate that, you're able to provide value. So I would say focus less on that fear of losing a job. And I would say also, even in the social impact space, this is where I really gave it a lot of thought. There isn't as much. And when we say innovation bred by this desire to just let's close out on this thing and move on. Let's really find a permanent solution. Is that, oh, what am I going to do next? But if you really sit back and ask yourself, there's a lot more problems out there than there are solutions. So what you'll do is you'll move to the next problem. I don't think there's enough folks out there really working on really good solutions to some of the big problems because they're focused on one problem for way too long.
It's like you're calling us to innovate. You're calling us to add value and to realize that by doing that, even if as you're calling us to work our way out of our current job, that doesn't mean that there won't be other opportunities, even within the organization that you are. You're opening up other doors and other spaces for us. And I love that you're using different language, but it's similar to the language I use about creating and how creating creates new opportunities for you. It's like adding value is what creates new opportunities for you. So if you're going with the mindset of how, there's a time limit here. I'm not here to uphold the endless processes that are going to keep me in a status quo or keep me relevant. But being relevant is about adding value. Being relevant is about creating things that are going to be of benefit wherever it is that you are. And that is what it is to be led by that mission. The mission is not to come and stay in the job or, climb the ladder or, be comfortable, but the mission is to deliver value. The mission is to create things that are going to be impactful in that regard. And everyone can do that, whether you're an entrepreneur outside or whether you're internal with an organization. So thank you for, I think the message has been, I hope the message has been delivered and received to folks who are listening that this is for everyone and that, even if you're in a job, in a role, in a career, that you're not outside of this call to this mission, to this purpose around creating and adding value.
Yep. And I would just say, in short for that, it's like you're working yourself out of a job, most likely will work yourself into another job. Just as short as that.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that Mansa Collab is doing? How are you doing this through Mansa Collabs?
Our focus is to support the growth of for-profit, nonprofit, and creative entrepreneurs. And my particular passion point is to work at the very genesis of new projects or endeavors of businesses. And we do that through a variety of services. It could be business development, project management, technology support. We're doing work around social media marketing at the early stage and looking at providing these kind of like services that folks would have to pay a bigger consultancy for, especially in the areas that I'm passionate about, which are like the cool projects that have a positive impact, but making the services accessible to them. And we're doing that, for example, in the nonprofit space around workforce diversity. You're familiar with that effort. We're working right now with folks around social media marketing who are promoting co-ops and cooperatives. We've helped folks that develop educational technology for African language learning and many other projects, some creative projects as well, some documentaries and the like. And it really is finding folks around 4 or 5 key areas and figuring out how to provide them that service to get them to the next level.
So what's for you? So what's your mission there? What's the problem that you're trying to solve, the value that you're trying to add to those people, to that space?
I started it really with this idea that I saw that there are other social entrepreneurs, creatives out there that are manyfold that lack trusted team member in a couple of key areas, whether it be in the technology area that they can sort of work with and help them navigate different, needs that they have, or in the business domain, various areas around business. And for the lack of them not finding that resource, their product isn't brought to fruition. And so for me, it really like the genesis of it came from, at the end of my work in international development, especially around young people, the focus there is really around jobs, making sure that we're able to find ways to keep young people employed, right? And especially in emerging markets, and my passion area is around the African diaspora context. And for those folks, if I sat back and thought about it, I can think about different products and projects to create jobs for the young people, or I can figure out the folks who are actually building companies that will be hiring young people. And at that point, I said, okay, so what's limiting their growth? And that's when I decided to start the consultancy that will work with these entrepreneurs or creatives, facilitating their growth. So in effect, when they grow, inevitably, they'll also solve the bigger social problem, which is, a passion area of mine, which is that youth unemployment and also providing innovations to the world that make a positive impact. So that's when I tied my personal mission to what the sort of foundation of the company is, which is, to do cool projects that have a positive impact and make money, ... most of the time. Because I understood that, there are going to be cases where folks can't pay you right away. But the value of what they're doing and what they're producing is going to be such that you have to figure out a way to make it work that's non-monetary, or it is going to be something of a donation in some cases. Some cases you're just front-ending their growth, kind of investing in their growth before it becomes a more of a paying opportunity. And that's just the way it is. And so, and that became part of how Mansa operates as well.
Well, let's talk about the money, because that's important.
Let's talk about the money. money.
Let's talk about the money, because that is huge. That's big. That's a big reason, barrier that people are where they are, or why people might not venture out into more creative or creating projects. And it's a big thing and factor that people are thinking about. So when you say that you think about the money, wait, what is your phrase? What did you say?
My phrase is and it came about because folks would say like, what do you plan on doing? And so I didn't really have like a specific, I'm not going to be like, 5-10 years, but I figured what I will be doing is I'll be doing cool projects that have a positive impact and make money, most of the time.
Okay. Yes. So I love that phrase. So yeah. So how does the money factor support, hinder, challenges in this whole process of being mission led? And how should people think about it? That's going to help them to continue to be consistent in creating.
So the money is a big deal. I'm not gonna minimize that. I think the way I've placed it, though, in terms of how I approach it, is the order of importance. Meaning, if I had said, I want to do money projects that are cool and have a positive impact, then that means that really, push come to shove, if there's a money project, but it's not cool or has positive impact, I would do it, right? If I had ordered it that way. But I didn't, so that I know what my order, how I make my decisions, how I pick my projects. So before I look at a project that pays, that does pay, okay, then it's very important. It has to meet the criteria first, though, that it is cool and it has a positive impact. I think that's the real gist of that statement. And not so much that you work for free, but that the projects you do get paid for, what are the attributes of those projects? Because you can be offered a number of opportunities, but which opportunities do you spend your time on, your creativity on? And that's what that means. But the money part is very important, because we have, mortgages, you have school loans, you have bills, kids. That's a key, crucial part of it. And it also is very important from a sustainability perspective and growth perspective as well. But I would say the ordering aspect of that statement is really what I mean by that, and in terms of making sure that for the opportunities that do get paid, you get paid on, making sure that you are able to categorize them based upon, the front end of the criteria. Are they cool? Meaning, is there something about this work product or work endeavor or project that's innovative, that has learning involved in it, that involves collaborating with people or places that interest you and allow you to expand your current knowledge or exposure, experience? Positive impact means, what's the result of your time and effort? Is the result of your time and effort going to make the world a better place for somebody?
This whole conversation around money and putting it in the right order reminds me of something I shared with you in episodes 10 and 23, the priority investment circle. In those episodes, I described the circle as a way to reorient your life around 3 things before you bring work into it. At the center is your health, then relationships, then creating. These ideas of reordering things is not about something being unimportant, but decentralizing certain things and recentralizing others. Ordering your priorities so you do the things and tend to the things that are most important first. I get and feel strongly about this idea, which is why what Samuel said about putting money in the right order was so affirming. It's about having a decision-making and priority filter. Samuel's not saying that money isn't important, but he's making clear that on the projects that he chooses that he is going to make money on, he's choosing to assess their worthiness of his engagement based on if they are cool and will have an impact. Essentially, if they're aligned to his mission. He's clearly not chasing the money first. But just because he's not doesn't mean he doesn't see it as important or place it somewhere. He does. It's just not first. There was another connection I made between money and something Samuel had shared earlier. What I like about that is you're helping us to make that connection between the value that we talked about earlier and the money. So we started with being mission-led. We started with, working your way out of a job. And this is helping me to think about how when you are doing something valuable, when you are creating those important things, it does create those opportunities for the money. Maybe not immediately, maybe not all the time, but there is definitely that connection. There is that line. And that is what this podcast is about, helping people to be paid to be themselves, whether it's internally in an organization or through what they create externally or wherever they're doing that. And why I wanted to have you on the podcast is that I've watched your journey. And ever since I've known you, you're someone who's always been very mission-led in what you talk about and what you're doing. Like, you're always talking about the projects, the impact, and all those things that you want to have. And I know you're not starving.
I got to eat.
So money is coming from somewhere, but that's not what you're leading with in the conversation and how you define yourself. It's not what's totally consuming that. And I know that you've even shared about how you being entrepreneurial, you showing up in a certain way, you adding value has created opportunities for you and brought in the finances that you needed. And so those things are connected. And, people don't have to feel like, well, how am I going to get the money? It's like, it's going to come with that, because when you're bringing value, when you're creating important things, someone's going to pay for that.
Absolutely. And, the thing is, we could just see the working landscape now. It's shifting, right? I mean, the nature of work is shifting. What the industries that, used to be considered stable are not stable anymore. The economy is like not stable. So we're all kind of in this flux trying to figure out a way to achieve all of these different objectives. And I think keeping it in a way where you follow these kind of very basic tenets of trying to solve the problems that are in front of you, having whatever your personal value system is, because everybody's different, but pursuing that. And then, of course, you cannot, and this is from the entrepreneurial perspective, you can't grow a business if it doesn't have money coming in. And you look at yourself that way, right? You can't do certain things unless you cover basic requirements for yourself. So there are ways that you can totally bootstrap your endeavors and your projects and sleep on everyone's couch and floor. But you can only do that for so long, right? You have to, at some point, be able to at least cover the basics for yourselves. And what does that cost? But either way, the process of figuring all of this stuff out, I think, makes you future ready. I do believe that. I think that because of where the work environment is and the way that things are shifting, this positions folks, even if they take it in a smaller version. I think I have a higher risk tolerance than a few folks, but for those who are more risk averse than that, there are simple ways, smaller ways that they can do it that does help them in the long run.
I like that. We do need to be future ready. The economy is changing. Things are shifting. The way that we've worked for decades is not the way that we're going to continue working. Even people who feel that they're in something that's stable or they're in an industry that is not going anywhere. All industries are being disrupted by new ways of working and new stuff. There's so much going on. Great resignation, whatever is happening. There's so much shift is happening. And we do need to have that mind of, how am I going to add value, show that I bring value to the table, because that is what will always pull the money that you need and give you the support that you need as you're going on the journey of creating with your gifts and, doing the important work that you want to do in life. So I like that call to be future ready and doing this work in this maybe a small way to the level of risk that people can take now, so that we're always ready for whatever that new future might be.
Yeah. And then I would also add to that, like, what has been some of the best outcomes of this particular portion of my journey, right? And I would definitely say that the people that I've met, and I think about, if I hadn't gone this route, would I have met these people? And I would say no, categorically no. You and I wouldn't have met. I wouldn't have known your work if I hadn't made a decision to sort of pursue my working opportunities the way that I did. And I think, looking at the money side, looking at yourself, your own ambition and that side, put that aside, just the people that you meet, which is also part of, I think, the future readiness, because those are also the folks that'll probably be helping you guide through the things that'll come up to help you land wherever you're supposed to land as the environment shifts.
Yeah. Getting out there and having a community has always been important, and is going to be even more important, going into the future. So when you're in a role or somewhere, and I've seen this where people are in an organization and they've worked there for years, they lose touch with a broader community. They're not building and expanding into that community or finding ways to do that. And if, as you said, things are going to keep shifting, and being part of that future readiness, you don't want to get caught out in a situation where for years you've been in a small pool, and then now you look around and you're like, oh, I don't know anyone else outside of this particular pond, and I need to right now. And so that's also an important part of the work of adding value and creating not just where you are, but beyond, so that you can make those connections as well. So my other question for you is about this idea of being multi-passionate and how someone who is multi-passionate can navigate that part of themselves, especially if it's something that for some people, I think it keeps them in a sense of like, well, I don't know what I should do because there's like endless things that I love and want to do. What do you have to say for that person? Because I think a lot of people who listen to this podcast would say that they fall into that category.
So I'd start off by saying there is a lot of value in that advice that a lot of people get around focus, being able to focus. I would say that that's really important, and that's something that will help you move forward on whatever you choose to do. That being said, having different interests, a variety of interests, for me, I think has given me an advantage. And I say that because it's actually a colleague of mine that noticed this early on in my career, who knew my various endeavors. And at that time, I was actually really into music and doing stuff related to music. But also had just graduated or was finishing up an engineering degree and doing IT stuff, websites and the like. And he said, you are able to essentially use both sides of your brain, which most folks are either going to be, I guess, analytical, or at least they'll lean a lot on their analytical side or pigeonhole themselves as being analytical or say, I'm just a creative. But I was able to do enough of the two to have at least a little bit of confidence in both of those types of thinking. And so when I saw that there was value when I approached the non-creatives, the folks that were more analytical, I can be that out of the box thinker, creative person. And then when I get to hardcore creatives, artists, I can be more the business guy, the sort of process person. I can switch to that role. And I can also empathize with both folks when I'm in there in the audience, because I can sit in each of their roles. So that ability to have very different types of passions, missions, has, I think, been an advantage for me, even in the working world.
And there you have it, my creating maven. You, in all your multi-passionate and multi-talented glory, no longer need to feel that this is a disadvantage to you. As Samuel not only said, but showed with all the wisdom he was able to give us in this episode, having these varied gifts will not only serve you, but help you serve others in glorious ways that you can only imagine. So lean into this, because the whole world is waiting for what you have to give. Before we wrapped up our conversation, I asked Samuel for what he wanted to leave us with.
The one advice I give entrepreneurs, that folks are starting a business or starting a venture, and they're like, what would you tell me? The one thing that I tell them is that this is a mind project. This has not about your skill, about your network, but get ready for the long haul and make sure to take care of yourself in the process, that you are able to work on your wellness, that every morning you set yourself up for the day ahead mentally, you know what I mean? Emotionally, spiritually, the whole nine. And in that, be ready for those days that things don't work out. Be ready for the great days when you feel like you're on it. That, for me, is the only piece of advice that I sort of categorically share with everybody, because that is what leads to the perseverance and consistency to see something through, to get to that whatever image you see yourself, or that desire you're trying to reach, that intangible, because you don't have anything tangible when you start. It is a foggy, dark environment. And so in order to have that wherewithal, there has to be a daily sort of practice to set your mind up to be in there. I'm not a big person of like, I'm going to work like 18 hours a day for 5, 7, years. I don't think that's sustainable. I think sustainability is a key for any creative, an entrepreneur, even in the working world. You know what I mean? Because your mind has to be in the right place to be creative, to do those things that will allow you to solve problems. And so that's one thing that I think is something that I would share. And then the second thing is shout out to the support systems. You know what I mean? Shout out to all the folks who do those small little nods of encouragement, who, say, keep doing it. I know you're going to make it, or who have a belief in your innate creativity or capability. Even the small words, like the person at the front desk of the building who shares like a nice word with you when you walk up and like, oh yeah, how you doing? That person who gets you, even if no one else in the whole office understands you, but that person at the front desk totally gets you. You know what I mean? Shout out to them, to the parents and friends and folks in that world, because they also, I think, are the enablers that a lot of times we do get in our heads, because you are the agent in this journey, right, of yourself. But we forget that, just like there are a lot of the forces that pull us away from our natural journey for the creativity, there are also positive forces that are helping us move forward in it. And, or even if they're not like saying like, bigging you up and saying, you're the best technology entrepreneur I've ever met in my life, which is like awesome. But even if they're the folks that are like listening to you and saying like, okay, well, let's have some lunch, and giving you a good energy, you know what I mean? And I think that's another thing that, I would say, even for the folks that are looking at this from a career perspective, build that community that you mentioned of peers, but also of folks that are not peers, but are able to sort of feed you in that way.
I feel like the wisdom applies. The wisdom that you've shared applies to everybody, because we all have gifts that we're creating with, that I want people to create with. And where you do it is not as important as the fact that you need to do it. And so thank you for sharing all the ways that folks, wherever they land, can do that.
Thank you for having the platform. This has been awesome. And I'm a fan of Joy and Joy's work. So look forward to all the cool stuff that's coming in the future from you.
Wow. I probably should have warned you to hold on to your hat, because Samuel brought the fire and had all the mic drops. Like most people, you probably haven't been thinking about your job as something you need to work yourself out of the minute you get into it. Yes, from day one, you need to be working your way out of your job. I think this was Samuel's greatest gift to us in this episode. I mean, what a concept to see your job as a place you go to solve one specific problem based on your unique skills and talents. And once you've done it, mission accomplished. It's time to move on. Seeing your job as a problem to solve with an expiration date is such a powerful new way to look at it. At a deeper level, Samuel turned our attention to the central place that adding value should take in our understanding of our work. This gives us a clear definition of what our value add is on the job. It's whatever problem we are uniquely suited to solve for a time. Well, dang, if we really take on this mindset, it makes sense now why he said we shouldn't be afraid to lose our jobs. Because really, this perspective would mean we had built the end of our jobs into our plan from the beginning anyway. As I said in episode 11, all jobs come to an end, but by taking on Samuel's perspective, we can be the driving force behind that fact from day one. Everything Samuel shared was clearly designed to make us future ready in a changing economy and world that is increasingly unpredictable. And at the end of it all, we can't forget just how much this is ultimately about our mindset. Take care of that part of you, and it will take care of you. So, my creating maven, how are you going to work your way out of your job from this day until you complete your mission and choose to move on? And when you get into your new job, how will you work your way out of that from day one? This conversation with Samuel was truly the reframe I needed in my life right now, and I hope you feel the same. If so, please share this episode with someone in your network. Talk about the themes and invite them to follow Reframe to Create on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or Stitcher. See you soon, Creating Maven. Until then, remember to always ask yourself, what will I create?